Woburn. I'm your host, Samantha Stone, and I have two guests with me today. We have the chairperson of our school committee, Crowley, with us, and we also have Mayor Scout Galvin. So we have a ton to talk about today because there's a whole bunch of announcements that happened at the state level about our phased-in plan for starting to reopen some of our businesses. So Scott will definitely help me drill into some of what that means for Woburn and some of the questions that we have there. We'll also touch base about the mask distribution on Saturday and get an update on how that went. But before we dive in, I want to spend a few minutes talking with Ellen about the school committee and the progress that we're making there. It has probably been a insanely crazy few weeks. I can't even imagine. I told my husband the other day that we've made a couple of very smart decisions in our life, one of which was having our kids very young, and I do not have young children at home right now. And so I am very sympathetic to all the teachers and the administration and all the staff and all the parents trying to juggle all of these things. And what I was hoping to direct our conversation about, Ellen, as much as we can, is to talk about what this sort of means for next year. And I want to first talk about some positive things. So we have seen, for example, that kindergarten registration is now available online. And I know we've seen lots of other things that are happening. Some of what's happened in response to this pandemic, I hope will probably continue and has accelerated some things that maybe we wanted to do digitally all along that we were able to prioritize. So I thought we could start by talking about what are some of the changes that have happened that you expect will be able to continue post whenever we get to some more semblance of normal.
That's an excellent question. I also want to thank you, Samantha, for doing these programs every week and keeping the public informed, because people can tune in and get updates, especially from the mayor, about what's happening in Woburn. So I deeply appreciate your work. I know you're doing it volunteer, so I appreciate that. And thank you for having me on. What we have learned in this situation is that we actually can do a form of remote learning. So when our school buildings close, it doesn't mean that school stops. We actually adapted, and I think Dr. Crowley and his team did a phenomenal job at getting distance learning up and running. Available online is a pretty amazingly comprehensive distance learning plan. And it's certainly intense, but we are doing public education, even though our buildings are closed, and I'm very proud of that. And taking that concept forward, maybe in the future when there's snow days, when there's other things that close our buildings, we will have the capability and the tools to continue on with our responsibility of providing a robust public education. Our teachers have learned what it's like to work from home. I'm not saying it's easy for them. I'm pretty sure it's pretty strenuous. But we as a community have adapted this type of learning, as well as our paraprofessionals, our related service providers, really everybody. We are all in this together, and this is an amazing learning experience. Secondly, we were not a one-to-one district. Our students did not have the capability of having remote access. But when schools closed, we immediately passed out all of our Chromebooks. So we think that we have reached every single student. But this is the issue. This year was supposed to be about equalizing public education. The Massachusetts legislature passed the Student Opportunity Act. And so 2020 was supposed to be all about equity. Districts that didn't have, that had high poverty rates and lack of access to things such as technology, they were supposed to get a bump in their funding. So it is those districts that are suffering the most. And so I think this is an eye-opening, just another layer of how wealth and how certain districts are impacted by the way that we're funded. And it's just an eye-opening lesson for us all to learn. And I hope that when things get back to normal, that will be taken into account.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about funding, because I think we're operating in unusual circumstances, but you still have to go through funding processes for next year. We still have to try and plan. I think most of us who are not involved on a day-to-day basis don't actually understand the financial burden that we've encroached. So if buildings are closed, costs must have gone down, right?
Yes.
And intellectually, I know that's probably not true, but I'm not sure I understand why that's not true. Can you help educate us a little bit about why we're not at this point saving money that we can be pooling into next year?
So we are given a certain amount of money to spend on public education. When we don't spend that money, the school district doesn't get to keep it. It in fact goes back to the general fund to maybe be reinvested. But we kept all of our employees in pay. So that's number one. That's a big heart of it all. And we certainly did expend a large amount of our funding sources on during the closure as well. Some of it is a savings, but whether or not that could be reinvested into new initiatives, or whether that's just going to fill in a gap in our funding that we're expecting from the state and city, that's another conversation. So there is some savings, absolutely, but it wasn't so much that we can fund a whole year or anything like that. Yeah. The revenue sources that we normally funding by are in serious shortages. When the economy shuts down, tax revenue shuts down, and when tax revenue shuts down, then that impedes our ability to fund. That's basically it.
Yeah,
and the mayor can certainly, the mayor and I have had many conversations about this. He's kept us updated on the status of the city since day one. So this is something that we're just expecting. It's not pretty.
So let me ask you a question. A couple questions have come in from folks. So one question is, how flexible have the transportation companies been in helping offset? I mean, aside from staff, one of our biggest expenses is transportation. Now, yes, we know those transportation companies have employees. They may be paying those employees, but some of their costs have gone down. They're not doing maintenance on the vehicles, or they're not paying for fuel. Is there any savings that we've been able to do, or are we locked into contracts that didn't allow that?
So our transportation contracts have been the main source of savings. So we have not paid our contracts, and there's a legal issue attached to that I'd rather not get into. We have two buses, two forms of transportation. One is special education funding, and then one is general education. So, and that's basically been the source of savings.
Okay, great. Scott, did you want to chime in? Did you have something you wanted to add to that?
Well, just like Ellen said, that is, right now that's up in the air, and working with Ellen and Matt and Joe to try to wring out some, savings that we can, put in the general fund and then use to bridge some of these funding gaps we're going to see. And as Ellen rightly said, transportation is one of the major areas that we're looking at. And now, Ellen knows as a lawyer that the general laws say that if a service hasn't been provided, legally you're not able to pay for it. So that's where we are right now. And I think the state is trying to work on some other quick laws like they've been doing to allow some middle ground there. But we'll wait and see. And we still have our thoughts on that. Me as mayor and Ellen and as the school committee chair, and what we'd like to see happen. So we're waiting on that. And some of the other areas, as you had mentioned, when the school shut down, the utility bills go down. But there's some savings there, but it'll help, but it's not millions we're talking about. But when you add up all the others and some of the the money we saved, Ellen, like with substitutes, we haven't had that. There are some savings that we're looking to, and as responsible stewards of taxpayer money, we're looking to maximize those for the benefit of our taxpayers. So we'll look at those long and hard.
Good. And I know that we'll probably have a chance to go into more detail in a few weeks about plans for the fall and where we're going and all of that. I know we've just gotten some guidance from the state about some processes we need to follow. I think just for those who are listening, the current school committee ask for next year is roughly 5.9% or just shy of 6% budget increase over this year. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the school committee does, the administration, because it doesn't become the school committee budget until we kind of vote on it. but the administration presented to us a budget with a 5.9 increase. The administration just budgets in a value system. This is what the school district needs in order to grow, in order to be prosperous, in order to meet all the needs of the students. And that's the number. We have a significantly large increase in the special education line item, not to demonize special education, but that's just the way it is. And then we also have our contract obligations from negotiated collective bargaining agreements, and that amount comes to around 5.9. So the school committee knows that that budget is impossible or unrealistic given the financial circumstances of the city. So we asked the administration to go back, relook at things, and reduce. And it's painful, and none of us wanted to do it. We don't like it, but we are looking at significant reductions in asks, of course, and then we're also looking at reductions in our personnel. It just needs to be said. And we're expecting a 4%-ish budget to see what that looks like to go forward. But this is not pretty. And I have to say that a pride in our school committee, in our community, is that our students do not pay for things like busing, like kindergarten, like sports. And we have a strong value in that in our community. So we take on a lot. And I'm very proud of that. But maybe, and I'm only speaking for myself, I am not speaking on behalf of the school committee, that maybe that is something we need to look into. But for now, no.
Yeah, thank you for that transparency. I mean, I think one of the things that's been great is I know you've been very open about the current situation. These are difficult decisions we have to make in education and in all parts of our budgets and our situations, and in our own homes and our lives, and every business is making decisions and all of that. So thank you for that transparency. For those who do want to stay very involved in understanding what discussions are happening and what options are being considered, I know that there are open meetings and such. Where would you like to point people towards so that they can follow that schedule and be involved where it's appropriate?
So every meeting is posted on my Facebook page. They can follow along in the public meeting. Our budget will be published. When we vote on something that we'd like to present as a final budget, we have a public hearing. And I will make sure that the public can speak on that, because these are crucial decisions being made that will affect children. And so I will certainly keep everybody updated. But we're very hesitant to, so just another piece of this is that we actually don't know a lot of things. We don't know if school is actually going to open in September. We don't know if we should be investing our funds in more technology to make remote learning better, whether we should be thinking about 10 children to a classroom, or are we still going to keep, our 20 children in one classroom? So we're budgeting in the dark with a blindfold on. And so I just would ask the public for their compassion and their understanding. And certainly when they're thinking about public education, these teachers are amazing. And they are working so hard for our children. I just want to offer my deep respect for them. And also our whole staff, everybody is working so hard. But that's what the public can do is just be a little bit compassionate, patient, and come to our school committee meetings.
That's great. Well, thank you. Is there anything else that you'd like to add before we turn our attention to other topics?
No, but I just want everybody I just want to offer my deep thoughts and my understanding for the parents that are home with their children, and especially the children that are the most vulnerable. They're keeping me up at night, and I'm worrying about these kids, and I want to get them back in the classroom as soon as possible.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being a steward of these important discussions and helping guide us through that. These are not easy decisions. And you make a very important point, which is we actually don't have all the information we need to make all the decisions right now. And you just got to do the best we can and continue to be adaptable as we need to, as we move forward. So.
And the mayor, just so everybody knows, the mayor meets with the superintendent practically every day. in some capacity. So this is a this is a citywide collaboration. Everybody's in this together. It's not city versus the school committee. We're all in this together. We're all working really hard together. So
Yeah, absolutely. Good job, Ellen. Yep.
Well,
Thanks,
I
Scott.
love that. Thank you. And Scott, I'm thrilled to see you back in your office. It's nice to see that. I assume means you're feeling good, and I think I had seen there was some mayor sightings at the mask distribution on Saturday.
Yes, I was there. Yeah, it was
That's
great. It was
great.
a great turnout, and probably about 1,000 cars went through, and the Board of Health did a nice job organizing. Police we had great police presence there. DPW helped set up, so it was easy access in and out. You know, it backed up at the beginning, and then after that, it was smooth sailing. But it was nice to see so many people come through, and people really were appreciative of the masks. And we've got another order on coming in, and we'll probably do another one the week after Memorial Day. Yeah, because I think there'll be a demand, you know, for it on a regular basis as this progresses, and people have to continue wearing masks out at, you know, stores and stuff like that.
Great. Well, thank you for doing that. And as you mentioned, there was a lot of announcements at the state level today about some things reopening and what the criteria will be for moving forward. Some of it looked at things like recreational space, office space, you know, with some constraints and things that are opening. What does that mean from a city operations standpoint? I know you're back in the office today. Are other city workers back in the physical building, or will they remain working remotely?
Well, for the most part, Samantha, we've been working. We haven't stopped since the whole outbreak started. The city hall has been open. We went to great lengths to make sure that everybody who did remain could work in physically distant quarters. So in some instances, in 3 or 4 of the offices, we had to do a rotating schedule, 1 day on, 1 day off. You know, for instance, in the treasurer collectors, there were 2 people had to go off and then 2 on. So we've been here, we've been providing services, and you know, it's been a good thing. There's been, you know, a lot of activity with the collectors, where we get our revenue. City clerk's been pretty busy, and the assessors are busy. And the inspectional service, where we do our permits, has been very busy, which is a good sign, because we will finish this, like I said, we'll finish this year off strong. Fiscal 20, we'll have a good year in fiscal 20. And then, you know, fiscal 21 is the one that, you know, we think is going to obviously give us problems, and it's going to give all cities and towns. You every time you look in the newspaper or turn on the news, you hear something about cities and towns, how they're going to struggle. But I think, you know, we've got some good opportunities. And I know I might have talked about this last time, Samantha, and I may have said something to Ellen, but that CARES Act has, you know, it's a public record, but it has some really good things for the state. We got $2.7 billion from the state, and Governor Baker freed up about $500 million to local cities and towns based on our formula. And the city of Woburn has been allotted $3.5 million. The only problem with the way the legislation was written at the federal level is it has to be used for expenses related to the COVID-19 outbreak and what you would do. But when you look at it, many cities and towns like Woburn and, you know, Burlington and Bill Ricker, we don't have that. We never will have those expenses. So there's been a big push from MMA. That's our, you know, group that represents us on legislative issues. They've been pushing to allow cities and towns to use that for revenue replacement, which would really be a great thing for all cities and towns, and go a long way to helping us fill our revenue hole next year. So we're hopeful that they change that legislation at the federal level. I know our entire delegation down in Washington is in support of this. So, you know, we're keeping our fingers crossed, and that, like I said, that would help one piece of the puzzle, you know, filling those revenues that we need to meet our budgetary needs for next year. So, you know, we're very hopeful on that.
Well, that's really good to hear. At this point, do you have a sense, like we're a town that has had good fiscal responsibility, and we do have some cash in the bank, and we do have some, you know, rainy day funds is probably the wrong word for it, but, you know, we do have some funds put aside. At this point, how much of that do you anticipate we might have to dip into, or is it too early to tell?
It's too early to tell, but I mean, if you're looking at, if you look at the estimates of what we're going to lose, and I've told Ellen this, a number of times, we're probably going to lose on the order of 7 million between local receipts, that's excise tax, meals tax, hotel, permits. Even though I say it's strong, it's next year is not going to be as strong as this year, but between those areas and local aid, which is the Chapter 70 and the unrestricted, between those two, it's 4 million and 3. So we're looking at 7 million just on those areas of revenue. Those are two good sources. Haven't even got to real estate when people aren't able to pay their taxes. What that's going to mean. So we have some issues. So we're prepared to use some of our rainy day funds to bridge, like I told you last time, to bridge that gap, Samantha, until the money comes back. But there has to be a combination of some belt tightening on expenses, and then of course the city using some of its reserves to get us to that point where the economy's back and we think that our resources are going to come back. But we know that Woburn's a strong city, and we want to do the best we can to keep moving forward, but we don't want to do anything that's going to put us way behind the 8 ball, and that's what you have to be concerned about. A lot of the cities and towns don't want to do that because it can have a downward spiraling effect on everything, borrowing costs and our tax rate. So we're very careful right now.
Okay. And is there anything that we as residents can do to help lobby and support the discussion around how the CARES Act funding can be utilized by different cities and towns?
Yeah, I mean, to start with, and they'll be open ears, but I would call Catherine Clark's office. I would call Elizabeth Warren. I would call Senator Markey, and definitely let them know how you feel.
Okay, great. That's awesome. I love giving us something to do because sometimes just advocacy is what we can offer, but it's a really important part of how these decisions get made. So thank you for that guidance. Yeah. For some services that we've typically done in person in City Hall, like I have a very selfish, I have a son who's about to turn 18. We always, the very first thing we do on 18th birthday or the weekday we're opening is we go register to vote together. It's kind of something that we've always done and we think is an important obligation. I'm assuming at this point we need to continue to do mail-in voter registration?
That's right now, that's the best way to do it, the quickest way to do it. And it is the most convenient. I know, like you said, for someone turning 18, it's a real special occasion. But at this point, when is he turning 18?
June 8th. So it might be borderline when City Hall will be open.
He could hang in there if he might hang in there, and there might be an opportunity.
Yeah, that's great. Well, we're happy
to always do. One of the things you can do, Samantha, which we could, we still could do, and sometimes the, Ellen might want to chime in. The schools could, work with Bill Campbell to do a, like a voter sign. I think they did that at the pond last 2 years ago. It was a good thing. You could have their masks on and people could still come down. That would be a nice thing to do.
Yeah, that's actually not a bad idea. That would be fun to just raise awareness of it. So excellent. And so for now, for those of us who are in town, continue to use the remote services to pay. There's the drop boxes in front of Town Hall if you need something. I've heard great things. People are finding that processing is happening pretty rapidly and seems to be on time, and phone calls are returned, and all of those things I imagine will continue as they always have.
They'll continue, and we'll fine tune them. And as we get ready to open up, there are constraints that are on us, but we think we're going to be ahead of the curve as far as offering more services, which we have been, but we'll fine tune them and try to, make them even better.
Good. Has there anything, I read a very lengthy, and I actually thought put together and thoughtful document from the state about what's reopening and what the criteria is and under what pace. I personally found it very helpful. But is there anything that was announced today that you want to make sure our residents are aware of that directly affects us here in Woburn?
I think everybody pretty much has seen it on TV. I have the documents right in front of me about what's open now, and really we've been construction in the city has been, like I said, it's been moving right along. I think you can see that when you drive around. So that's no change for us on that end. No change on the enforcement. The manufacturing it's a good thing. I think it's a good step, and the protections are there. And the curbside retail is something I think that it will be in effect today. So I think that'll help. But I don't know how the other retailers are what they're going to do, to what extent they're going to open. As my personal feeling, and I've said this before, is I think that there's very little difference between a TJ Maxx, a Dick's Sporting Good, Home Goods, any of them versus CVS, or we have the Lowe's open. So I think that, it's a good first step, but I'm really hoping that those get fully opened, or at least to, a portion of the capacity much sooner, because I think that's a big key to the economy. But otherwise than that, I think people will be happy as this stuff rolls out. I know people wanted more, but we'll get there, and it's coming.
Yeah, I'm glad to see some progress and some clarity about the process that people are going through. And I do think there are appeal processes and things that people will continue to go through as they need to. One of the things that will help us keep these businesses open and open more is to continue to abide by physical distancing and wearing masks and doing the things we need to protect the community, so we can all feel confident that those places can open and
right.
Protect their employees as well as their customers. So thank you so much for joining us today and giving us an update. And thank Ellen for joining us, talking about what's happening on the school, but also talking about in general what's happening in the town. It's great to know we have another order of masks that will be distributed in the coming couple of weeks as they become needed. The Board of Health had a phone number on the flyer that for people who weren't able to physically come to the mask distribution.
Yes.
Just out of curiosity, did we see a lot of people take up that offer?
They did some delivery as far as, some of the elderly or others who weren't able to get out. So they took some phone calls, and they've been delivering them right out of the Board of Health. But if anybody does, they can certainly call my office too, Samantha, and we'd make sure that they get the masks. But that's great. It's been good.
Scott, one of the things that has been a big tradition in Woburn, of course, has been celebrating Memorial Day. Well, celebrating is probably not a good word, but recognizing Memorial Day and celebrating our heroes that have sacrificed for us. We won't be able to honor them in the same way we always have this year, of course. Can you tell us a little bit about the city's plans?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Samantha. We, like you said, we have in Woburn a great tradition of recognizing our veterans, recognizing those who gave the supreme sacrifice for their country to allow us to do everything we've been able to do. And we have a great veterans agent, Larry Giuseppe. George Poole is fantastic on the Veterans Council. Right now, as it stands, we're still under the order that you can't have more than 10 people gathered in one spot. So they're advising cities and towns to honor Memorial Day, to honor those who served, to light up a building in the city gold. So we have City Hall, of course, the cupola will have a gold light up there. And then on the common, as we generally light up for different events, we'll do that in gold as well. So it'll look nice. It certainly won't take the place of the great Memorial Day celebrations we have when we go from Cemetery, Common to Woodbrook and then to Calvary. But, given these times, until we're given the ability to do that, this is how we'll celebrate. So it'll be nice. It certainly won't be what we've had in the past, but we'll go from there.
Well, thank you for doing that. I think that's really important opportunity for us to honor people in the way that we can, and that's a lovely recognition. And for those of us, we may not be able to participate in the promenade and the ceremony in the same way we have in the past, but we can donate to an organization. We can remember those who we've lost. We can send a note. We can visit someone in a cemetery. So it's a little bit more on us as individuals to do
Definitely.
that, but it's lovely to see that the town is recognizing Memorial Day and again, the way we can. Thank you for doing that. And thank you to all of us, all of our neighbors in Woburn. Let's continue to take care of each other. Let's continue to support each other in these challenging times. We're starting to do new things. The best way to continue to be able to continue to open and operate and grow back to something that feels more like normal is to continue to practice good hygiene, to keep physical distancing where you need, and to wear masks where it's appropriate and necessary. and to be patient and compassionate with each other as we have, and as Ellen mentioned, as we start discussing some very difficult decisions the city has to make across all the budgets and all the things that we're going to be doing.
Thanks. See ya.
Thank you.
Bye.